going to invite our sister, Phyllis Terwilliger, who's the United Methodist Women Northeastern Jurisdiction Be Just, Be Green Jurisdictional Guide and Climate Justice Advocate, to open us up in prayer. So Phyllis, if you could unmute yourself and share.
Let us pray. Oh God, you are the spirit that took primordial soup and created order. You are a God that so loves the world. You are a savior suspended on a cross, struggling to breathe. We come before you, acknowledging George Floyd's murder and the air that was denied him because of racism. We acknowledge children in frontline communities whose asthma makes running, jumping, hopping difficult. We confess that 71% of African Americans live in counties in violation of air pollution standards. I can't breathe is uttered by far too many. Breathe on us, breath of God. Fill us with life anew. Empower us to faith, hope, and love in action. Amen.
Amen. Phyllis, thank you so much for that. So our time together, we are going to do a brief overview of the Just Energy for All campaign, do some vision casting, and get some directions on how we can create our own story, and hear 2 examples, and then we'll practice. This is, as I said earlier, our first of many monthly strategizing and capacity building calls. And we've reached out for you for surveys and input, and you've given us input, and at the end, we'll also have a survey for you to get feedback on so that we can make these most useful and beneficial for you. And today we'll be hearing from 2 of our United Methodist Women leaders and interns who will give insights in how we too can communicate our story. So very excited about that. And before we dive in, we wanted to do a quick poll. So Erin, if you could generate that poll, we wanted to know who's around us here. We heard from you in a variety of ways. We'd like to hear when other United Methodist Women and others are around, where they're from. So please join us in filling out this poll. And if you are joining us on phone alone, or somehow, or if for whatever reason your poll is not working, I'll read it out to you so that you can put it in the chat box. Are you a member of United Methodist Women? Yes or no? What is your jurisdiction, if applicable? So one of the 5 jurisdictions. And have you participated in a previous UMW Just Energy for All training in person or a webinar in some form? So we'll take that just to get a sense of who's with us around the table. Okay, we're almost there. We'll wait for another second, about 10 seconds, and then we'll close the poll. Okay, we're going to close the poll. And so we have 91% of you who are United Methodist Women. And for those of you who are not, welcome. This United Methodist Women welcomes all persons to join us and work on this effort around just energy for all. So we're glad that you are here. In terms of jurisdiction, we have the most from Southeast, and then is North Central, and then and Western and South Central are pretty close with Northeastern as well, and several who are not UMW, that would make sense as well. And 68% of you have said that you've participated in a Just Energy for All training or webinar, and 32 who have said who have not. So what we're going to, and so thank you for sharing about who you are. It's great for those who you are not UMW to be with us, and those who have never joined us for the first time for you to be here. So what I'm going to do is do a very brief overview about our Just Energy for All campaign so that we're on the same page. We will be having a three-part webinar on why Just Energy for All, what is and is not Just Energy for all, and how can we advance Just Energy for All in the fall again. So I would encourage you to join us for those conversations and encourage others. And we will also be having an online version where you can do a bridge course, our online learning platform, and you don't need to be United Methodist Women to participate in that. So consider doing that as well, and that'll come up hopefully in the later fall as well. So next, about Just Energy for All campaign. For those of you who are familiar, you may remember that United Methodist Women has been involved in the work of environmental justice for a number of decades. I speak to folks from the nonprofit and environmental justice movement who've shared, we received funding from UMW 2 decades ago around this or around that. You know, we were so impressed by UMW who've done fill in the blank. And as the climate crisis became more evident, United Methodist Women redirected that focus specifically around climate justice, and over the past 2 years has focused around the Just Energy for All campaign. So it's within the larger climate justice umbrella. And we have 3 other issue priorities: maternal and child health, interrupting the school to prison pipeline, and living wage. And in many ways, Just Energy for All is directly connected to all of those other areas. It is essentially intersectional. When you start looking at one thing, you see that climate justice is a racial justice issue. It's an economic justice issue. It's a maternal and child health issue. And I wanted to note that in framing because a while back, we had goals that did not sound as compelling. We want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the top emitting sectors. And people said, come again? What do you mean by that? What is the goal that you want? So we started instead with a vision that we want. A vision is to have just energy for all. It's not just for a few or those who can afford to have solar and wind and purchase it, but that it would be available for all. And that when we're talking about justice, it's also for those who were part of the energy economy, the coal miners and others needing to transition into new jobs, or those whose communities have already been impacted by the toxins or the extraction of the fossil fuel or nuclear extraction as well, or waste, or so it's throughout the supply chain. And so this is the big picture. What you'll see is we have, our goal is being stewards of God's creation, work with companies, governments for clean, renewable energy through a just and equitable transition. And you'll see we have fossil fuels on the left. We want to move from that to clean, renewable energy, but we don't stop there. We want to make sure that we have a just and equitable transition. We focused on the transportation and electricity sectors because those are the biggest emitting sectors. So if we tackle transportation, if we tackle electricity, we would have addressed significant portions, in both in terms of the climate crisis, but also reducing air pollution, which directly impacts the well-being of everyone on the earth. And then we would do that through education and training, and contextualize really actions at the national and local level. So we know some things can only change at our efforts at the federal level, and we also know the federal landscape. So there's a lot more work that needs to be done at the state level. And of course, elections are coming up. And so I would encourage, if you haven't done so already, to make sure you've registered, and also with all the candidates, be asking them questions in terms of how, if at all, are they advancing just energy. So we'll talk a bit more about that later on. And around climate justice and just energy for all, we want to understand, why should we care? So we broke that into 5 reasons. Number 1, it's our biblical and Methodist mandate. I really will not go into much detail on all of these. These have been in our 3-part webinar, and you'll have the opportunity, if you haven't done so already, to participate in the future, but I wanted to just give you some key highlights. It's our biblical and Methodist call. So we looked at John 3:16, right? God's love was not only for humans, but for the world, which is cosmos, everything in it. So that means it's not only humans, but everything, all, including the air, the water, the other sentient and non-sentient beings. John 3:17 says that God did not come to condemn the world, but to save it. And in the Greek, the save, it also can be translated into rescue, to heal, to make well, to restore to full health. So that is God's longing for fullness and abundance and healing, not for me alone, but all of God's creation. And so that is expressed in our social principles, including the section on the natural world, where it notes that all of the creation is God's, and that we have a particular responsibility to be stewards and to care for it, not because of its utility or usefulness for us, but because of their inherent value that God has deemed in them. Our social policies, the Book of Resolutions of the United Methodist Church, actually has a number of statements around climate justice, creation care, and I want to lift up in particular Energy Policy Statement 1001. It actually speaks about the importance of how our energy must not be one that is harmful. It must have sustainability and justice as core to it. So that's reason number 1. Why should we care? It's our biblical and United Methodist call. Number 2 is the reason we should care is that our current energy system is harming God's people and creation. And we could think about our current state of the climate. The Secretary General of the United Nations said climate change is the greatest threat to humanity. And if we think about just our communities, and if you think about the past even few years, these are just one of thousands of pictures I could have shown. And you probably have examples in your own community and around the world where climate crisis has impacted communities throughout the world. And we are in hurricane and fire season yet again. And so deep concerns about right now with the coronavirus and the pandemic that's happening, need for social distancing, need for to contain fires. How do we even have social distancing and safety in this context, right? It impacts women, children, and youth disproportionately with the climate crisis and just energy for all. And we also recognize that our current energy system is not just. And so what you see, what we talked about before, is the images on the left is all of our source of energy. So you have about 36% from petroleum, 31% from natural gas, 13% from coal, only 11 from renewable, and then about 8 from nuclear. So those are the sources of our energy. And on the right-hand side, this is in the United States, majority of that are used in terms of end user consumption, 37% in transportation, 35% in industrial, 16% in residential, and 12% in commercial. And all of that, majority of all of that is from fossil fuel emissions and fossil fuels. So is our energy just? So we looked at that, looking at natural gas, coal, oil from fossil fuels, biomass, which is renewable technically, but it is incredibly harmful for the environment in terms of wood chip burning, and also nuclear. In terms of emissions, it might be lower, but the dangers, and that's, you know, if you think about Fukushima, Berg County, many other locations as well. And think about uranium extraction as well as the waste from nuclear and whose communities it's harming. We could think about the impact that fossil fuel is happening through not only our buildings, but also our transportation itself and who it harms, the number of children that are being impacted. Did you know that more than 25 million students in the US, more than half of all students ride a school bus? And my daughter is actually one of them. And approximately 90% of school buses in the US are operated on diesel. Children on diesel school buses are exposed to 5 to 15 times more air toxins than the rest of the population. And lungs develop until the age of 20. Diesel emissions exposure has been found to pose as much as 23 to 46 times the cancer risk considered significant for children under federal law. I can give you many more examples around the implications of tailpipe emissions. And I noted even the connection with maternal mortality and infant death. The impact of oil and gas extraction from fracking leads to significant levels of preterm birth, high-risk pregnancy, low birth weight, congenital heart defects as well. So these are intersecting and cross-cutting. But the great thing about all this is that clean and renewable energy is possible. There have been cities and states who have been making efforts and movements forward. That's very exciting. The technology is there. Just to be clear about the definition of clean renewable energy, it's any form of energy from solar, geophysical, or biological that is replenishable by natural processes at a rate that equals or exceeds its rate of use, right? So it's replenished, it's natural, it has to equal or exceed its rate of use. So this is from the UN IPCC report. And we also wanted to include what many other organizations have been putting in, that it is not harmful to communities and our environment. Again, because there's some renewable energy, like biomass, that can be incredibly harmful. So just because we hear the term renewable doesn't mean that it is necessarily good for the environment. And just because we hear the term clean does not actually mean that it's what we're looking for, because as I wrote there below, clean energy is carbon net neutral, but it may not be renewable or sustainable and also can have significant impacts. So renewable energy can include solar, can include wind, but with all of those, even with renewable energy like wind and solar, we need to be mindful of justice and equity. And the reason for that is a just energy system is not guaranteed. So that's reason number 4. And so we want to move from an extractive economy where there is extraction of resources, where it's consumeristic based, where there's a collection of power and where there's governance, where it's very militaristic and there's a lot of exploitation going on. And as people of faith, I feel like we, and as Christians, we may not use exactly all of these terms, but I think biblically there is resonance with regards to an economy that takes and does not care, that is not stewarding God's creation. And we want to move towards a regenerative economy where it is about sustainability and the resources are regenerating. The worldview is about caring and sacredness. The work is about collaboration. There's deep democracy that if we say no, that we don't want that in our communities, that is not the type of energy that we want, we should be able to have a say in it, especially when it's harmful, and that there is ecological and social well-being for all. we believe that everyone has a right to safe and affordable energy. And this is part of the NAACP Just Energy Policy Toolbook that really provides guidance in thinking about what a just energy system looks like. Unfortunately, the reality is that many do not have even affordable or accessible energy around the world and even in the United States. Jackie Patterson, the Senior Director of the NAACP, had noted that the cost-benefits analysis of how the utility business model is structured around utility shutoffs in the face of such wealth-building focus means a choice of life and death for some and a choice between a Porsche and an Audi for others. And so when we think about, even right now with COVID-19 and those who are unemployed, who are unable to pay for their utilities, whether that's electricity, water, or broadband, that people are making a dire decision. Sometimes do they buy prescriptions or do they pay their electricity bill? And so what we're looking for and advocating for is that when we're looking for 100% renewable energy, there must be, it must be in mindful and of whether or not we can afford it and who is paying for these costs as well. So we have been recommending that when we think about 100% renewable energy, we need to have a comprehensive building. And so this is one model from the 100% network that talks about we need aggressive targets. We need to prioritize frontline workers. We need to think about water and land. We need to think about energy that is regenerative and disposal and switching of dirty sources. We need to be thinking about community benefit, ownership, and control, healthy buildings, because sometimes we don't think about buildings as much, and efficiency and access for all, governing oversight and inclusion, and transportation justice as well. And the other component is that in the United States, we can be part of the solution. So we are also part of the energy system. So if you and I choose to say, okay, I'm going to move towards 100% renewable energy today, I'm making that commitment. Unfortunately, the reality is that, as we shared earlier, this grid, is that most of us would not be able to do so. If you've done the pre-work that we sent you, or if you were part of our webinars in the past, you will see that if you try to move towards, like I have natural gas as my stove that we cook our food, so I can move to electric, right? So once I save enough money, I could get a new stove that's electric, but where is my electricity coming from, right? Most of that for me is from fossil fuels. So I can't just immediately shut that off to renewable because the electricity itself is coming from fossil fuels, and for that to change is a larger policy change at the municipal, state, or federal level. And so we've been trying to understand what that means in our particular context so that we as UMW can be part of making that change. Okay. And we begin with UMW because our UMW community has incredible resources, gifts, assets, skills, and connections. And we take everything from our members, recognizing what we like, the assets and gifts of our community, the things that we want to see happen within our own UMW, even in the next 5 years, the reasons why our members might not want to be part of a Just Energy for All campaign, the health issues in our own community, and by understanding even the reasons, what may seem like barriers or even the health issues actually helps us understand what people are thinking, what the concerns are, how to reach our members, and how, understanding our gifts, we can organize and mobilize as well. So our vision together is Just Energy for All. Our goal is 100% renewable energy that is centered on justice and equity. We have worked with a lot of the UN recommended minimal targets that 45% of all of our energy is from renewable energy by the year 2030 and 100% by 2050. And this is based from 210 levels. Some of your states might be far more ambitious already, which is great. And some other organizations might be advocating for more ambitious targets, and we support that as well. We just wanted to know what the minimum level is. We recognize that electricity and transportation in particular are important to focus on, and our goals must be informed and shaped by communities and leaders most impacted. So that means environmental justice communities, climate justice communities, workers, and there are at least 2 resources on the italicized that I noted as well. One of the partnerships that we've done at United Methodist Women is with Green for All, which is the Fuel Change campaign. So you may remember just a little while ago, I noted about the 25 million students who ride buses and the health impacts that it has, which leads to their ability to even be at school because they may have an asthma attack because of the toxic emissions in the bus. And that also impacts the school bus driver. It impacts the communities that are even just breathing the diesel from outside. And so this fuel change campaign is to work with school districts and school buses to transition towards 100% zero emission vehicles and funding around that. And so that's one target that we've been working on. Another is thinking about your own state. Working in your own state or municipality to say we want 100% renewable energy that's justice and equity centered, and that might be stronger renewable portfolio standards, which relate to the percentage of renewable energy, to make sure that there's equity as the focus, and the targets might be the governor, the Public Service Commission, et cetera. And there's a variety of strategies, but one thing we've been emphasizing again and again is that we do not do it on our own. We work in coalition with environmental justice organizations and other organizations that are working on this. And so we can advance just energy for all together. I've said a lot. I hope it provided an overview. And for those of you who have are new to this, I hope it gave you some information. I know that was a lot. We have our 3-part webinar that we encourage you to join, either virtually when we have that in the fall, or you'll be able to take the bridge course. So I wanted to invite us actually to take a moment to breathe. So inhale with me, just breathe in deeply. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. And we're going to spend some time to do visioning. Vision, according to the dictionary, is the faculty or state of being able to see. So my question to you is, what is your vision for just energy? What does that look like? Can you even imagine it? Do you know where you want to go? So I'm going to invite you to take a moment to get comfortable, whether if you're seated or if you want to lie down, you want to stand and stretch, but be comfortable. You can close your eyes as well, but I would invite you to do what you need, but just make sure you're able to hear the prompt. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. So I'll give you a moment to just get adjusted. And imagine yourself, you are at home right now, and we are in the time where some of us, the rise of COVID has been rising in your community, so masks and stay-at-home orders might be getting more stringent. Some of us are in communities where we can frolic. But imagine that we are COVID-free, and that you are able to actually walk out your door without any concern for COVID. So we don't have that with us, and you're able to walk out. And so imagine just walking out freely, and you're walking down the street, the driveway, or the road, whatever that is to you, that you're walking out. And as you walk out, I'm going to invite you to go to the end of the road. And at the end of the road, there is a ship. It's actually a spaceship, a time capsule, a time travel ship. And you're going to go in there. You go in, you close it shut, and it's moving. You feel the acceleration, the rumbling, and you are off and out of your block, your town, your neighborhood, and it's spinning and it comes back down, and you settle down into that same road that you left, but it's no longer the year 2020, but it's the year 2030. So you open the time travel spaceship, you open that out, open the door, and you come out. And this is, you are in a space where just energy for all has been achieved in some form. So I want you to step out, and I want you to inhale and breathe the air. What do you smell? You look around. The buildings and the homes that normally are in the space where you just left off 10 years ago, but it's the year 2030. What do you notice about them? Are there solar panels on the buildings? You see some buses and cars or trucks coming by. Will you quickly close your nose so you're not inhaling fumes? Or are you able to just breathe in because there is no emission and the buses and vehicles have been electrified? You walk, and this is the summer, of course, and summer camps are happening, and children are running around. There's no coronavirus again at this time, so you don't need to be worried about that. And children are frolicking, having fun. And you see just your neighborhood and your community. Think about the energy that you feel from those children. You walk a bit more, and your church is there. And there's a United Methodist Women circle or district or conference gathering that's taking place. So you go in. And you hear them talking about just energy for all and how the change of our energy system has impacted their state, their community. And you see some of your other members of United Methodist Women talking. What are they saying to one another? How are their health doing because the air is cleaner? What about their energy bills? Has it gone up? Has it gone down since all these changes have taken place? You listen, you learn, you wonder in amazement by all these things that have happened, and you return back from the UMW gathering. You pass now the children frolicking in the summer camp. You go back to the road near your home, and you get back in the time travel capsule. And you close the door, and time starts to shift again, and we're going back and back and back and back, but we're not at 2020, but we're at 2022. You open the door again, and now you're all of a sudden in Orlando, Florida. It's the UMW assembly that's taking place. You hear UMW women celebrating, it's jovial, it's loud, there's been a vaccine for the coronavirus, so everyone is celebrating, they're together. And you step out into the main plenary area, and you're hearing this jubilation because United Methodist Women from your conference in your state are celebrating success around just energy for all. And there's media outlets like the New York Times, Washington Post, the Tribune that come and they're taking note of what has happened. And the next morning, the headline for the paper from these news outlets begin with United Methodist Women celebrates just energy for all because because they have succeeded in fill in the blank. So what is that blank that you read? Is it about 100% renewable portfolio standards, 100% renewable energy in your state, that there's been electrification of buses? What are you celebrating? So I'm going to invite you back. You've listened, you've heard, you want to take that paper with you that you read, but you can't bring anything back with you into the time travel machine. So you're back in there, you close the door, and you're brought back to the year 2020, and you return, you step out, and you return back to your room, and now you're here with us during our call. So I'm going to invite you to open your eyes. So if you just take a moment to jot down, either on your computer, on your phone, it could be in the chat box, what did you envision in the year 2030 and the year 2022? Lynn Calvert typed more trees, better smells, quieter. Poorer areas, Jane Yeager, poorer areas having access to energy savings, things such as solar. Julie Gordon, no barriers to having the energy needed in every home. Pat, lots of local churches hosting community solar projects. Glenda Hardin, mass transportation. Betty Dickey, that California has shut down all fracking. Rita, new electric school buses. Gertrude Stewart, more parks during green areas. Thank you for even sharing just some of these. Deborah, a cleaner earth and atmosphere. And thank you for taking some time to do a visioning exercise. I think it's really important because if we do not see what the vision is, it's really hard to imagine what we're doing, right? And it could feel like the same old, same old. And I don't know if you thought about, you may have been, very happy to stay in the 2030 and didn't move to the 2022 very quickly. So, but if you did, 2022 is assembly. It's happening in 2 years. And I want to invite you to, again, think about what is it, the change that you and your UMW members want to make in the next 2 years. And recognizing the virtual context that we're in, what are things that we can do, even at the advocacy level, and also recognizing that it's an election year as well. So I invite us to think about that more. I'm going to move us to our next activity is, thank you for sharing your vision, is on public narrative and story of self. So this is originally adapted from the work of Marshall Gant. And so if you've done this before, please raise your hand in the chat box. There's actually a function, or you can just type it in saying that you've done this before. And it is the story of public narrative. And I'm just going to get to that document. Give me a moment. Hoping that this will work. And the importance of this, I found this very helpful because it's an opportunity. It first recognizes that all of us has a compelling story to tell. And so what we're going to do is learn about some of the basics of how public narrative works, our values, emotions, and story structure, and then we're going to practice here, and then practice and then receive feedback and learn how to coach others in the process. And when we think about stories and sharing, it is exercising and choosing to say something, right, that's of import. We say something because it's important in some way out of all the things that are racing in our minds. And so public narrative is about accepting the responsibility for enabling others to achieve a purpose in the face of uncertainty. And I think about that in the climate crisis that we're in right now. It may feel like there's so much happening, but it is providing and enabling others, including ourselves, the ability to respond and speak truth in a direction. And so the narrative is about how we learn to make choices and to construct our identities as individual, as community, as people, as United Methodist Women, as people of faith, as nations. And one thing I love about this structure of public narrative is that we all have a story, and that our stories can help move others to action. And when we learn the skill, it can really help us to move from ourselves, the community, and the need for urgent and hopeful action as well. So how many of you, when you think about having been compelled or changed, or when you came out of a workshop or a presentation or a speech, how many of you come away with like the stats in your head, right? Or how many of you come away with a compelling story? So if you could type it in, which way do you go? Do you go mostly by the statistics that you're hearing, or mostly by the story that you heard? Okay, we have story, stats, story I heard, okay. So it's varied, right? And public narrative requires the use of both the head and the heart to mobilize others to act effectively on behalf of shared values. So it engages people in interpreting the why they should change the world and their motivation, right? How they can act to change it, and which is their strategy. The public narrative is about the why, the art of translating the values into action through our stories, right? So it's this both and that we want to do that's bringing that connection together. So we do need that critical reflection on experience. We need that story. Often some of the best ways of couching statistics, and I do like information myself, is in a story. Right? So it's not just pure numbers, but it's happening in this particular context, in this particular community, in this particular time, with this particular person. And so in this, what you'll see is that it's leading to a shared understanding and what that action needs to be. And the key to motivation is understanding that values inspire action through emotion. So what that means is that emotions inform us of what we value in ourselves, in others, and in the world. and it enables us to express the motivational content of our values to others. And stories draw on our emotions, and they show our values in action, helping us really feel what matters rather than just thinking about or telling others what matters. And our BJSP Green Jurisdictional Guides, we've been reading 2 books, one on toxic communities and environmental racism, and another on As the Grass Grows, on Indigenous environmental justice. And they both have tremendous facts and stats, but the latter one, there is a story and a narrative arc there. And so one of our members who was sharing about reading that said, I was drawn in to the story. She was speaking from her heart, and that resonated, right? And the stats and the facts stayed with them longer. So it's not just thinking about or telling others what matters, but conveying that through story. Because stories allow us to express our values, not as abstract principles, but as lived experience, they have the power to move others, right? So we're moving from values, emotion, to action. Some emotions inhibit action, but other emotions facilitate that action. So have you ever felt that there are times when you hear something and you are led with inertia, apathy, fear, isolation, or self-doubt, and what can I actually do? And so what you want to do is that then we want to have emotions that facilitate action. So that urgency would overcome inertia, anger, overcome apathy, hope, overcome fear, solidarity, overcome isolation, and YICMAD, which stands for you can make a difference, overcome self-doubt. And when we think about this, we want to frame it, or Marshall Ganz frames it, recognizing a plot begins with an unexpected challenge that confronts a character with an urgent need to pay attention, to make a choice for which she is or he is unprepared. And then that choice yields an outcome. That outcome teaches a moral lesson. And and because we empathetically identify with the character, we can feel that moral. We not only hear about someone's courage, we can also be inspired by it. And so the story of the character and their efforts to make choices encourages listeners to think about their own values and challenges and inspires them with new ways of thinking about how to make the choices in their own lives. And I think the most important thing that I hope you get out of what I've been sharing right now in the Ganz frame is that public narrative is really the combination of the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now. So what that means is that the story of self tells us why you have been called to serve, right? So we all have some sort of story. We've all made choices that shaped our life. And we want to and how we responded to that challenge we faced as children, whether or not to take leadership, or the hopes to take risk, right? So there's a story. And we want to focus on those choice moments in our lives where our values become real, when we have to choose in the face of an uncertainty. A story of us communicates why our community in particular is called to act, and why we in particular have the capacity to lead. So the key is to focus on telling a story about specific people, specific moments or choices, and the story of now communicates the urgent challenge we are called upon to face it now, and what you call on others to join you in action. Okay, so the story of self, the story of us, the story of now. And so what I'm going to do is now hand it over to Rita Smith, who is the president of the North Central Jurisdiction of United Methodist Women. And she has been an active member of United Methodist Church and United Methodist Church since her childhood, and active in United Methodist Women as well. She is an educator. She is a coach. She has served in a variety of capacities and has received many accolades. So I'm going to hand it over to Rita to share her story. And what I'm going to invite you to do is listen to what resonated with you when she spoke or as she speaks. So Rita?
Okay, I have to unmute myself.
Yes, we hear you now. Oh, I think you're muted again.
Okay, am I good now?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It is indeed a good day to be here, and I'm so excited about sharing my story. Liz, I need to say that again too. Thank you for asking me to share my story. And I just hope it inspires others to do this just work. Because my story is about how my life is affected through my granddaughter, Imani, and all the other school children with asthma. Clean air should not be an option. Our car industry should have all our cars manufactured with zero emissions. The transportation industry pollutes the air, causing my granddaughter to keep an asthma pump with her when she was at school every day. And while in school, she also had to keep one in the school's office. But all Chicago public schools do not have nurses every day. And it just so happens one day, the school had to call an ambulance to take her to the hospital. This day, I often wondered if this asthma attack was initiated from the public transportation buses, or the school buses, or the cars while she was waiting for her school bus. This is my reality. Polluted air causing my granddaughter and other school children missing days at school, which in turn what? Hinders their education. As a Christian and a United Methodist woman, we are called to take care of the earth and to be good stewards. By polluting the air, climate change is a reality, which is harming children and adults who have respiratory ailments such as pneumonia, bronchitis, and also eye irritations. When I learned the United Methodist women were making climate justice a priority, I knew I had to get involved. During my learning process, I became aware of the tailpipe pollution. And you know, I often thought about seeing all that black smoke coming out of these public buses, the school buses, the cars, the trucks, the motorcycles, knowing that couldn't be good. How many vehicles, though not producing the black smoke, were still polluting our air? Thank goodness, Illinois requires car inspections, though not yearly, but they do require them. So damage to our respiratory systems and other health issues are in our population is ongoing. So I had to testify when asked about this at a Ford dealership. The health of low-income families and communities of color is disproportionately damaged by tailpipe pollution. And rolling back fuel economy standards means denying them the promise of cleaner air and a healthy community. Particular impacts on marginalized communities compared to non-Hispanic white children. Latino children are twice as much to die from asthma, while African American children are 7 to 10 times likely to die from asthma. We, as United Methodist Women's goal, is to have cleaner air, to have more electric cars, to eliminate all these air pollutants. The change I would like to address is for the automotive industry to manufacture cars, trucks, military vehicles, farm machinery, actually all vehicles, to eliminate the gas emission from fossil fuel. And you ask me why? So that those with respiratory health issues like my granddaughter with asthma and those with pneumonia, bronchitis, and eye irritants would be able to breathe and to see easier. Now, the choices we make, we know it's all about money. So how much are we going to spend for health issues? Does this sound familiar? Health disparities. With cleaner transportation vehicles, our air quality would be better for the world. Children would not have to miss school due to respiratory problems, asthma in particular. We would have healthier children and adults and a healthier community overall. Our population would have lower respiratory health issues. The air quality would be better for all, and the children would have better school attendance. And this is my story. Thank you. Thank you.
Rita, thank you so much for that powerful story that you shared. I'm going to invite us to type in the chat box of what resonated with you. And as others do that, Rita, would you be able to share how you decided on that particular story of all the other stories that you could have decided on?
Well, because it was personal, it really hit me with Imani. When her school had to call me to say that we have an issue with your granddaughter, and I said, well, what's the problem? They said she's having a problem breathing and she doesn't have her asthma pump. So I said, well, where's the one at school? She has one at school. And the lady said, she used it up the last time and she didn't bring another one. We need you to come right now. So this is why I had to get issue with it. That's how come I had to deal with this. It's asthma. And like I said earlier, and you had said some statistics about how so many school children have asthma, which results in lower attendance in the schools, which results in what? Missed school days, results in what? Missed education of our children.
Thank you so much, Rita, for that. And how does this inspire you then to get involved as United Methodist Women?
Oh, that means there's more work I have to do. Because as you know, as most people know, we women in UMW, we women of action. You know, we just don't sit around and talk. We got to do something. And this is what we do. We had our letter writing campaign. We talked to our legislators. We talked to the car industry, and we have to work. We have to do action.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rita. I so appreciate it. We're going to hear next from Sarah Sohn, who is our climate justice intern. You may have met her in other contexts, but you'll be hearing from her now. So Sarah, if you could unmute yourself. I'm looking for you.
Hello.
Thanks, Sarah. I'll handing it over to you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. As Elizabeth said, my name is Sarah Sun, and I'm the climate justice intern with Elizabeth in the climate justice office. So I'm just going to be sharing a little bit of my story. So my story starts off is when I was in high school. For some of you, that might have been a long time ago, but yeah, so I was in high school my senior year, and I was really concerned and worrying about, oh, what's my next step? I got accepted into college, but what is my major? What is my calling? And how should I be furthering God's work here on earth? And when I was trying to figure out the next steps into college, I was reminded of a time in my AP Environmental Studies class. So that day, my teacher was talking about um, how communities that live near air power plants or where air pollution is very high, they have a higher rates of respiratory illness and cancer. And I also learned that day that these communities were often low income and communities of color. And what I learned that day really stunned me because I was never made aware of this, all these issues, these realities that a lot of people that could have been me have been facing in America. And this late revelation made me realize the own privileges that I have that I wasn't aware of, how little I actually know about what's happening in America and what's happening to fellow brothers and sisters, and also how I haven't been fully living out the Christian life that God has been calling me to live. So from a young age, from Sunday school, every time I attended church, my pastor would tell me how we should be loving, we should be caring, we should be seeing everyone as our own brother and our own sister, and being loving towards them. But this new reality of how I could be contributing to the problem or not even helping with air pollution in other communities made me realize that there's so much more that I could do. So I actually decided to study environmental studies in college. And I decided that I have to start taking action with all of this knowledge that I've been gaining since high school and also now in college. So as I've been learning more, I found out about just energy and how good renewable energy and also how just transition is really important for the environment, also for these communities as well. So advocating for just energy has been one of the ways that I've been able to connect my knowledge and also tangible steps forward to creating a just and equitable world as God intended it to be. So one thing also that I've been able to gain from advocating for just energy is to be joining in this wonderful community that also advocates for the environment. As God also calls us to be in community and to be stewards of the earth and to help the weak and the oppressed. One way that we can help to bring that change is to come together to change how energy is produced in America and also who bears that energy burden. So yeah, I learned that the climate crisis can't be corrected just by the actions of one person. But when we come together, we're so much stronger and we can help fight against the injustices that people face due to the unjust energy production and how also how God's creation is being treated unjustly. So that's my story.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you so much. And Sarah has been our intern virtually for the past year, but she's been more intensively doing this summer, so we're grateful for her. And for those of you currently, if you could all type in what resonated in Sarah's story, in her story of me, us, now. You should have all received an email a few hours ago with a document around a worksheet that we're going to use. So you're welcome to bring that out with you right now if you would like. You don't have to, and you can just use your computer, pad of paper, your journal that you can write in. But what we're going to do right now is I'm going to invite you to develop your own story. The goal is not for you to succeed in finishing your story today, to perfect it, but in the next few minutes, I just want you to take some time. What is the change you want to make in the world around just energy for all? What are you called to? Why are you called to make that change? What specific experiences have shaped your story of self? And what personal story can you tell that will help others understand why you want to make that change? And so I'm going to put that in the chat box. I don't know if I actually am able to put that in the chat box. Yes, I am. And so if you want to turn off your camera, you're welcome to, but just take the next few minutes in crafting your own personal narrative. In a moment, we are going to go into a time of sharing and practicing. So please remember, in terms of structuring, you begin with a story of self. You heard from both Rita and Sarah that they situated their own location, who they are, what challenge or what was going on. They shared about how it connected with UMW, who is the us, and then what is the action, the strategy and action that they are going for. So I think about that. Who am I? What is my story? We as UMW are working on this. And then, and if you're not UMW, you could say faith communities, you could broaden it, or who that us is of shared value, and then now. And if you're thinking about, well, who is my audience? Think about, like, you know, if for you, those of you who are United Methodist Women, situate that within your fellow United Methodist women when you would want to share this with them, whether at a unit meeting, a circle, a district or conference, or at a church meeting, or at a gathering. Okay, so I recognize it's not going to be perfect, and please do not make the perfection be the enemy of the good, right? So we're practicing. Yeah, and so this is what some of our studies that we've been doing on our 3-part webinar has been looking at in terms of its health impacts. Because sometimes when we think about climate change, some talk about the polar bear, some talk about sea level rising, but the air that we are breathing and the impact that it's having, there is a personal connection to all of us, I think, in some ways. For me, I grew up having asthma. My father has COPD, and we check the air quality every day to see if he can open the windows or not, right? And he's also someone on a fixed income. And so New York, they've been raising the electricity prices significantly. So that's impacting what he's choosing to pay for and cover, et cetera. And we as a family financially supporting one another. So thank you so much. I'm cognizant of our time. We're already 4 minutes over. I want to invite you to think about where you plan to share your story. You've already practiced once, I hope, and I hope you got some positive feedback. I hope you were energized about it. There's more learning to do for all of us and movement forward, but where do you plan to share the story? So if you could type that in terms of where you plan to share your story, whether that is in your next UMW activity or annual meeting, having a space for that, or in a newsletter, or writing to your candidates and noting the reality and finding out how they are voting and supporting the issue around just energy. So where do you plan to share your story next? And how will you, this is my daughter last year, so that's she's now 6, but this is when she was 5, so she's pointing at all of us. Will you commit to advancing just energy for all? And the picture above her is actually of the sea, this is at Coney Island, being polluted by plastics and other toxins. And so I think it's a reminder for me, with my daughter pointing at me like that, it's a reminder of are we taking responsibility and using the powers that we have as United Methodist Movement women to move forward. So thank you for your time. I know that we are 5 minutes beyond time, so thank you for your patience. I hope this provided an opportunity for you to practice your story, to do some visioning. Even with these exercises, please consider doing this with your UMW members and others as a way to communicate. The more we talk about it, the more it becomes an issue, and hopefully we could begin to bring about change. We will have ongoing monthly strategizing and capacity building calls. We have a survey, so please fill out the survey, and we'll send the evaluation out via email as well. So thank you again. I think there were some questions in the chat box I heard, so I'm looking at that now, and my chat box is not showing up. So, so I apologize, but we're going to end with a blessing, and for those who want to stick around with the questions,
I'm at my UMW meeting.
So, oh yes. So please, we release you if you need to go, but Phyllis is going to close us with a word of prayer for those who are able to stay for another minute or so.
Let's pray this prayer together in unison. God of possibilities, through your calling, we rise up
to dare to believe
that the earth
can
be healed.
and the hearts
of your people can be turned.
So
Justice and equality
are the norm
instead of the exception.
You have
empowered us with this vision,
and we
ask you to uphold our belief
that
what we hope for is possible.
You are
present in our pain,
when
our work for the future
of
your creation seems to be stalled,
and progress
unperceivable.
help us
embrace
the pain, frustration, uncertainty,
and
fear we have
to step out of our comfort zone
and rise
and rise to the challenge.
challenges.
only you
know where these steps will lead.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And thank you to Rita and Sarah in particular for their powerful stories. And thank you for each of you for being so vulnerable and sharing today. Blessings to you. Thank you for your patience as we went 8 minutes beyond time. And we look forward to connecting with you in the many days and weeks ahead as we all seek to advance just energy for all. Blessings, and for those who can't stay, I will try still to find the chat so I can answer them. We'll try to address them next time.
Liz, I have the question.
Oh, found it. Okay.
You want me to read them to you?
Okay, sure. And I'm not sure if the people who are asked the questions are still here. So, okay, what are the questions?
So Deborah O had a question about electric cars.
Okay.
Doesn't look like they're still on the call though.
Okay, what was the question?
It was about how we reconcile the reduced emissions with the costs of mineral extraction and disposal of batteries.
Absolutely. So I think this is a huge question, and I think about like even the that's with electric vehicles, but also with solar panels as well. I think those are hard questions that we do need to ask again and again. Similarly with lithium, it's required for certain things, but it's not required for solar panel, but they're using it. So there has to be those questions that are being pushed, because if you just listen from certain industries, they will not talk about it, right? They want to use the cheapest, even in the solar and the wind industry. So I think those are very important questions. We've been asking about that, both with regards to electric vehicles and batteries, but also solar panels, and should be the same for wind. So I don't think there are easy answers, but we should be asking those questions and looking at the research.
We had another question from Cynthia Taylor, who said the UMC has many old buildings that are in disrepair and use fossil fuels. What can we do when some of our churches are struggling financially and a number are in communities of color?
Yeah, I think some of these have to deal with policy legislation that needs to be changed, both in terms of incentive, tax rebates, and funding as well, so that the transition can occur and it's not borne upon nonprofits alone or churches alone. And so this is why we need a system-wide approach, and that can be done at the municipal and state and federal level. There also has been efforts like with the Solar Equity Initiative that United Methodist Women is part of with the NAACP, Vote Solar, SIA, and other entities, where we have been working specifically with UMW, looking at national mission institutions to have solar panel installations, and also to do policy advocacy for a reduced cost and community solar and other ways of turning buildings and looking for energy efficiency and funds for those areas as well. So I think it's a huge issue that, again, should not be addressed. And depending on where we're located, that might be how we want to advance just energy for all. Right, and saying these buildings, and I know Amy Ryder was in the call, she was talking about incredible air pollutants indoors as well, so being able to address that with natural gas and other entities as well. So those are some of the connections. There's an organization called Green Emerald Cities, and they have a huge equity focus, and they produced a report recently that came out on buildings. And how buildings, energy efficiency, prioritizing environmental justice communities, and policy solutions as a result. So we can include that in the link because there are specific recommendations and guidelines that they're advocating for. And again, the 100% network, the 100% policy for regenerative policies, I think they have a number of policy recommendations for buildings. And I know UMCOR has a number of grants for energy efficiency as well. So that might be another avenue.
Rox Collins had a question. They're no longer on the call either, but is there a way to quantify how much fuel has been saved during online schooling this pandemic? Might be a way to illustrate the impact of the busing.
That's a great question. I am sure there is, as they have done like other studies. I would be looking forward to that as well. And also at the same time, the health implications right now on just children who are missing school and the loss of learning and the disproportionate impact that it's having. So I think those are all important things to track. Well, thank you all for spending a little more time with us. We don't want to keep you any longer, but blessings to you. Thank you for the work that you do. We would love to hear about what you're doing, so please send us emails about your activities. We will send a questionnaire. We'll also look through the chat box and try to have more time for conversations like this on our next call. Blessings to you all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It was an honor and privilege. Thanks again.
Oh, we have your story, Rita. We recorded it.
Okay, all right. You be blessed as well, all of you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you. Thank you all. Blessings.